everybody, it's Sarah, and today's video is a bit belated March wrap-up as well as a wrap-up for the two readathons that I joined in March, which were the Re-Read-A-Thon and the Adventure-A-Thon. And also, I am sorry that I couldn't upload any videos last week. I just didn't find time, or I was beyond exhausted and just didn't feel like filming and editing. So I just decided to skip a week and to give myself a bit of a break, and I hope that's okay. Anyway, now let me jump right into the wrap-up. This month was quite successful for me in terms of reading. I read a total of 5 books, of which 2 were rereads. I also was in Germany at the book convention in Leipzig, where I have been almost every year for the past 8 or 9 years. I think I skipped once, but aside from that, I was there every year, and this year Christopher Paolini, the author of Eragon, was there to sign, so I got my first signed book, which is very exciting. And yeah, so just overall it was a really successful month. The first 2 books that I read last month were my 2 rereads, and those 2 books were Vision in Silver as well as Marked in Flesh by Anne Bishop, the 3rd and the 4th book in the other series. And the 4th book, which is Marked in Flesh, was also one of my books on my TBR for the Re-Read-A-Thon, and it's also the only book I managed to read during the Re-Read-A-Thon. I am not quite sure for which challenge I chose it. I think it was probably Old Favorite, but as I said, I'm not quite sure. So the Re-Read-A-Thon wasn't too successful for me, but I still really enjoyed rereading both these books. And by now, actually, I have also reread the 5th book, finished the 6th book, and I'm in the middle of the 7th and last book of the series, but I will talk all about that in my wrap-up for April. And yeah, I really love both of the books again, and Bishop's books for me are just books that get better with every reread. Another reread that I started but that I barely got into because, of course, as I saw Christopher Paolini in Leipzig, I really felt motivated to finally maybe finish the Inheritance Cycle, or at least reread the 2nd book and then read the 3rd book, which is the book that I own. So I started rereading Eldest, which is, of course, the 2nd book, and I got in like 90 pages, which isn't a lot in terms of how big this book is. And so this is definitely a reread that I'm going to continue, not this month because I have my TBR set for this month, but in May. Then the first new book that I finished in March was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, and of course there was a huge hype about this book all over Twitter, all over the book social medias, and I won't go too far into my thoughts on this book right now because I actually have a whole review on it, both with a spoiler-free part as well as a discussion part. So if you want to know all about my thoughts, more than just that I enjoyed, although there were some parts that I had some issues with, especially the ending, then go and check out that review. The only thing that I want to mention right now is that this is definitely a good place to start if you want to get into high fantasy, because while it does look intimidating, it is only a standalone novel, so it's quite easy to get into, and then, you know, once you have finished a book, you're done with it and you don't have 50 other books to finish in a series. And also the world building is quite easy to understand. There aren't too many characters that you have to keep track of, and also it features same-sex relationships. There is one relationship between 2 women and one relationship between 2 men. So if you're interested in that, I would definitely recommend you check it out. And then the last 2 books I read were books I read for the Adventure-A-Thon that was created and hosted by Novel Thoughts. The first book I finished was The Masked City by Genevieve Cogman, which is the 2nd book in the Invisible Library series, and I did enjoy this book more than the first book. I really love the characters in this book. I really love the concept of the whole series. The concept kind of is you have the Invisible Library, which is kind of a network of people who jump through different parallel universes to gather special books, and through gathering those books they kind of help keep the balance between chaos or the fae and order or the dragons. And it's just, I love the main character. I love the side character. I love all the weird parallel universes because some are very futuristic and others are more set in the past, which incidentally was the challenge that I read this book for. It was fate or reading a book that was set in the past. And then the second challenge that I used this book for was Poison Apple, which was to always snack while reading a book. And I thought that was a lot easier with this short book than the second book that I read for the Adventure-A-Thon, which is a lot bigger. And that book is Shaman's Crossing by Robin Hobb, which is the first book in the Soldier's Son trilogy. This time I do know what the trilogy is called. And I actually really enjoyed this book. I think I enjoyed it more than the Farseer books that I read so far that focus on Fitz, but I didn't enjoy it quite as much as the Lifeship Traders trilogy. And the thing that I find very funny with Robin Hobb is that while reading her books, I often get the feeling that they're written by a man. And I don't know what exactly gives me that feeling. Maybe it's because there's basically no female characters at all in her books, which kind of was a bummer, to be honest. Not gonna lie. There was like one female character that played a bigger role, so yeah. But also this book is a bit older, so maybe that's one of the reasons. But aside from that, Robin Hobb is one of those authors where I really enjoy the plot and I really enjoy reading what happens, and I get pulled into the plot a lot even though I don't connect to the characters at all. And in most cases I don't like the characters at all, and quite a bit of the time I actually find them quite infuriating. So yeah, that's quite interesting. But to be honest, I don't want to recommend this book yet because I haven't read the rest of the series yet, and so I want to read the rest of the series, hopefully this year, then maybe do a review on the whole series and tell you more on my thoughts and whether or not I would recommend it then. And also the challenges I read this book for were Toad, read a book with green on the cover, and like obviously this book is very green, and also Journey, which was to read a book with more than 500 pages, and this book has a total of 670 pages or something around that number. So it's quite a long book, quite a hefty book, but I did enjoy it. And as always, the last thing that is left for me to do for my wrap-ups is drawing my books or my choices from the TBR chart for this month. I always draw 3 choices and I have to read at least one book from those choices. Last month, I forgot to mention that as well, Shaman's Crossing was one of the choices, so that's what I read from my TBR chart. And this month, again, I already drew the choices, so you won't get to see me do that, because I decided to join the Owls at last minute. I will leave the Twitter link down below. It's a readathon that's going on throughout the whole of April. And yeah, so I already drew my choices so I could then think about my TBR for the month of April. The first one I drew, funnily enough, was The Masked City, which of course I already read now, so that choice doesn't count, and I just hardcore failed at ripping this paper. Whatever. Let me go to the actual choices that I drew. The first one I drew, which already was a pull from January, funnily enough, was Lady Gregory's Complete Irish Mythology. And yeah, I didn't read it back in January, and I already decided which of the books I'm going to read for this month. So sadly, this isn't on my TBR this month as well. And yeah, I'm sorry. My second pull was The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, and I've had this book on my shelf for ages. I know that there are a lot of people who hype this book up a lot, but for me it's actually quite difficult to read books set during the Second World War. I don't know if it's me specifically, if it's also because I live in Austria, where of course like there's a lot of stuff to remember about the Second World War. We learn quite a bit about the Second World War. So I feel like a lot of times I just don't have the distance necessary to read books set in the Second World War. So I have been putting off reading this book for ages, and it won't be read this month again because again, it didn't fit any of the challenges that I wanted to do for the Owls. The book that I'm actually going to read, that I funnily enough also already pulled in January and pulled again now, is Magician's Apprentice by Trudy Canavan. which is a prequel for the Black Magicians trilogy by her. And I'm not sure what the name of the challenge is exactly that I'm reading it for, but it's to read a book with red on the cover. And it doesn't really look like there's red on the cover right now. I mean, of course, there's like the title that's written in red, but I just decided to cheat because I basically don't have any books with red on the cover, and I can't read Eldest because I already started that last month. So this whole book is red if I pull off the dust jacket. So that's why I'm going to read it for the owls. But yeah, that was it for my March wrap up. Tell me in the comments down below what you read in March. Was it as successful a reading month as I had? Because for me, I actually read a few books. I read more than I usually do, and I didn't really have any duds among those books, so that was quite nice. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. As always, all the links to my social media are in the description box down below, as well as my review for the Priory of the Orange Tree if you're interested in checking that out, and I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!